With the Diablo IV Beta in full swing this weekend, we thought we'd dive over to Windows 10 on Steam Deck to see if it's performing any better than on Steam OS, and I'm actually quite surprised at just how good this looks. Now, if you're wondering why we picked Windows 10 over 11, I say it time and time again, on Steam Deck Windows 10 is just much more stable, and if you don't believe me, just talk to GameTech Planet. I'll leave a link in the description below to his video, but he had several crashes running this on Windows 11 and the frame rate was nowhere near as good. And I can say that after playing for 2 to 3 hours today on Windows 10 on Steam Deck, I got 0 crashes and I'm very happy with the frame rate. As you can see here, we're getting a good 50 to 60 frames per second pretty much all the time or above, and this footage that you're looking at just here was actually running medium settings with FSR. You still get the GPU error being not supported when you run this in Windows 10, but clicking the OK just moves you past this and into the game. I did find that the best settings, again, similar to Steam OS, was to run this on low settings with FSR2 on balance, but I could turn the low FX off on Windows 10 and it would still hold 60 plus frames per second, pretty much solid all of the time. Now you still get those loading spikes, but this is just a bug in the game. You really see it when lots of mobs spawn in or you run into a new area, and especially running around towns, but that's very consistent across the board and will be patched out, no doubt, in the near future. But as you can see, I was running very happily at 60 plus frames per second there, and it does look good. You can push this up to medium with FSR2 on balanced, and for the most part it will stick above 60, especially in the dungeons. Even with the boss fights with tons of stuff going on, it does still hold above 60 on the medium settings, but it does make the deck run a little bit hotter. And to be honest, especially if you're looking for battery life, you are going to want that stability of the lower settings. It really didn't make a huge amount of difference to me, not for the amount of stability anyway. This was much more apparent when you came back into the outside world, and now we're getting bigger dips down even into the 40s. And those loading spikes seem to have happened much more in the medium settings than it was on the low. So although it can run higher settings than on Steam OS, I don't recommend it, as like I said, it does run quite hot and that stutter is much worse. So FSR2 balance with low settings is definitely my favourite way to play on Steam Deck. Now it does still get a couple of dips down into the 40s during those lag spikes, but they are very brief. You can see as I was chasing the treasure goblin across here with tons of monsters spawning down on me. Again, you get those loading spikes down into the 30s occasionally, but as soon as you're in an area for more than a few seconds, you're straight back up to the 60 plus mark. Just to give a quick comparison with the Steam version, if I put them side by side here with Windows 10 on the left and Steam OS on the right, it is arguable that the Steam OS picture quality does seem ever so slightly clearer. However, it does become much more apparent when I put the frames per second together in the same area with the same settings. Although there is slightly better visual quality on the Steam OS, it is very negligible. It does struggle to hold that frames per second more solidly. And when it does dip, it dips way down into the 40s much more regularly than on Windows 10, where I did have the frame cap off just to see where it's sat, and it stays up above 60 pretty consistently with a very occasional dip down below. To come full screen then, again you can see Steam OS really starts struggling when we get a bunch of monsters on the screen. The more monsters, it definitely dips down into those 40s and 50s and really starts to struggle. On Windows 10 though, it does dip occasionally below that 60 mark, but even with all the effects going on in the open world here, it's still holding above 60. So overall, Diablo 4 is playable on Steam Deck on both Windows and Steam OS, but it is ever so slightly better on Windows 10. Hopefully this will get better with the GE Proton versions, but I was using the GE Proton 751 patched version on Steam OS for this comparison. Let us know in the comments below if you're going to be diving into this beta, and hopefully I'll see you in game.